Hey guys, what's up? This is JGZ with the Shadow Axis Blur Racing Clan for Xbox 360. Trying to show you today how to get models out of racing game Blur. Basically, you first off have to have a 3D Ripper because the game files are pretty much locked out. But this is a 3D Ripper DX version 1.81. Not sure why they don't have the .1 there, but it's a tool that sits between basically the game and DirectX, which is how Windows renders certain games and other media on your screen. And basically sits in between there, and it sucks the file or actively captures the file as it is being displayed to Windows. But this is a program that can work for many different games. I believe you can download it from deep-shadows.com/hacks/3dripperdx.htm. And what you end up with after you install the thing is this screen here. Up in this field you can put in the executable of Blur, which should be in your program files or an Activision folder, something to that effect. Command line parameters don't really put anything in there. That's mostly for other games. We haven't figured out anything for Blur that'd be important, like running a custom command through a shortcut or something. Your capture keys you want set up in such a fashion is that you're not using the same key for your capture key as you would in game for like a pop-up menu or pausing or something. Because if you're doing that, you're going to have the in-game panel pop up in your face, and it may cause that screen to appear being captured instead of what you're wanting. It just causes problems. So you're better off trying to check what keys the game is using in your options menu, and then coming back and saying, okay, F3, F4, F5, or whatever is not being used, so let's go with that. Pretty much any F key can be done with. Shaders is mostly pertaining to lighting and some other things. I don't really care to grab them in this case. Textures we do want. That's the skins that cover your game world, whether it's the cars, the ground, the sky, whatever. It could be pictures that are even part of the menu system in Blur, but all that stuff you want at some point or another. And it's this program's actually pretty excellent as to getting a hold of it. Window mode says that maybe you're running widescreen and the game is really designed to run at like 1024 by 768 instead of stretching it all the way across your screen and distorting the models. You can run in window mode and hopefully keep the game at a good ratio so that it's not all stretchy, and then your models that you get out of this program will end up all stretchy and distorted, or at least try and limit that. It's not a guarantee because things are just the way they are. Disable shader model 3.0. As it says here, force DirectX to report the video card does not support vertex and pixel shaders. Whatever that means in there, we could launch a discussion of it, but in this case we're just going to leave it disabled. It's not important for getting something out of Blur. This, however, is important. This wavefront OBJ capture. Wavefront OBJ is a model format that a great many free editors and stuff you can download will display. In this case, though, I don't think it does a real good job, because I've taken the output from this and it kind of looks like somebody exploded a bomb in an ice cream factory, because it's pretty nasty. It doesn't really combine things the way it should, and you usually end up with a couple 100 megabyte file that is kind of useless. So I'm going to leave that undone. These three directories should be in your My Documents folder. It'll be automatically filled in when you've installed 3D Ripper DX. Leave those be or whichever, or customize them to your liking. Anyway, once it's all filled in, hit your launch button. Blur will start up. This window will disappear. You can go into your single player showroom and capture vehicles pretty easily there, which is what we'll be showing here in a minute. Or you can go into campaign, or the single player game type in there, and like run on Mount Haruna or San Francisco or any of the rest of them. Now, one of the key points, though, is that in racing games, when you're traveling around the racetrack, what is behind you is typically not being rendered or, if you want to call it, drawn to the screen. So the capturing program is not going to pick that up. It'll pick up a little bit, like what's being shown in your rear view mirrors or whatever, but it's not going to do the entire map at one time, probably. So that means you're going to have to probably go around the track, capturing every so often to pick up different chunks of the track, and eventually come back into a program like 3ds Max. Hopefully you're a halfway decent model or something, or you can get a hold of somebody that can do that for you, and basically merge those or stitch them back together, kind of like a panoramic photo, and get a full complete cityscape out of it. You'll also be having the cars in there, and you might find that an easier way to get a full car model than going into the showroom, or you might want to capture people models inside the car looking out the side window or something. That's in there. That's where you go to get that. I would not, and I would stress would not, try to capture anything from multiplayer. It's because when you start 3D Ripper DX and Blur or whatever game shows up, you'll have a little thing up in the top left hand corner saying ready to capture, and then when you actually do activate a capture using the key, it will lock the game and kind of pause it. It'll freeze it so that you can't do anything. You have to wait on it until it's done. In Blur's case, it then immediately takes you to the pause menu if you're in single player. If you're in multi, you're not going to have that option. So you're either going to crash everybody else out that's trying to play the game with you. You might, end up crashing your own system. There's no telling. It's just not a good idea. Don't bother with it. Now, as to getting the legendary cars that are only in multiplayer, I'd suggest going into the multiplayer showroom, because that's probably your easiest method of trying to do something. So once you've done your captures, it might take you 3 seconds. It might take you 5 to 10 minutes maybe to get a capture saved. Like I said, the game will release once it's done, saving the files. Back out of Blur, just escape and enter as needed. Blackout. This will be gone, like I said before. Go into your My Documents folder. The frames will be the model files for the entire area. Your textures may have several hundred, if not a couple thousand pictures in there. But you will be able to get the car textures and everything else. It may take you a couple different runs, but you can do it and have all that stuff outputted to a file. It looks to me, having gone through the textures, that the cars are using 1024 by 1024 DTX1 or DTX5 DDS type textures. You can look at them with a hex editor and see that in there, but you'll have to do some finagling around in hex in order to get those back as files, because they don't have the proper header. Yeah, I know that's a lot of geek speak right there. Don't get thrown off track, folks. But that's what you'd be opening up, is either your textures or your frames in My Documents. So let's go and open up a scene that I've already captured. Go down, or open up Autodesk 3ds Max. I'm using version 2009 here. It also works, from what I understand, with 3ds Max 7 up through 9, and then of course 2009 that I'm using. But here we've got a, go up to your file. Go up to your file, go down to import. In this case, this is Class B cars that I've got open here. As you can see, I've got 3DR files, which is what the default export type is for the Ripper program. And then I've got a bunch of those wavefront objects. As you can see, the wavefront objects are almost 60 megabytes each, and they really aren't that useful. I've popped ones out that are at least 300, if not more, megabytes in size. So it's debatable on how useful they are in terms of blur. Here we're going to open up number 28 file. It's about 9.5 megabytes or so. This is our import options for the Ripper. It's part of the plugin for Macs. Your field of view is part of your screen, just like if you're in a first-person shooter, giving you a larger field of view will give you, more peripheral vision in like Battlefield or something. Monitor aspect ratio, as you can see here, 4:3, 16:9, 5:4, 16:10. That's going to depend on your monitor. So whether you've got like a big honking monitor at 1920 by 1080 or something, that may be relevant as to what this game's running at. If you're in windowed mode and it's like a little square, it's probably 4:3, or an older game like Delta Force. It works like that. That 1920 by 1080 would be 16:9. Hopefully you should be able, at least in the case of Blur, to go down here to recommended values, and I'm not sure which of these is right, the field of view 60 or 63. I'm going to go with 60, and it'll set that for you. These are all the default settings for the Ripper. You can go to their 3D Ripper DX site that I mentioned, which was at www.deep-shadows.com/hacks/3D-Ripper-DX, and they've got a little quick start guide. I'm sure you could adjust these to make things better. What you're about to see is going to be kind of a mess on the screen, but you could probably go down through these and set it up a little bit better. There's also a lot of people on the forums at that place that have scripts and that for 3ds Max that can fix a lot of the problems that come up with either textures or skewed models or normals being flipped or all kinds of other mess. But this is what we're going with for right now. And at the bottom of the screen you get a little loading bar. You can't see that because I cut off the bottom of the capture tool I'm using right now, but it's about 55% done. I'll give it a minute here. Boop doop doop doop. There we go. Alright, so what are we looking at here? We've got 4 viewports open. This is the top view, front view, left view, and perspective up in the corner. What we have here is basically 2 copies of the same thing showing up, and one is at a different turn or angle than the other. It's basically crooked instead of aligned with its other brethren, so it's set up wrong. But let's see, we take these over here and I'll show you what we're actually looking at. This is the showroom map, pretty much. You can see this is the 4-way crossing. The textures are messed up for the road, some other things, but if you have those by hand, you can always reapply them or fix them in Max or something, or get a script to do it. I'm just going kind of au naturel here. You can see just a little bit. We have a car. That car on top looks kind of like it's been chewed on, though. Let's select just a car and kind of move on around it. And let's use Orbit. Makes a much better tool. Okay. Say we've got one car sitting on top of another car because we've got 2 copies of the entire level. Why does it make 2 copies of everything? It could be due to the reflections in the puddles on the ground in the showroom. I've heard that from a couple different posts on that forum. Like there's a puddle over here and a puddle over here and some other stuff all over. The reflections cause duplicate models, supposedly. Thankfully, it's not too hard to get rid of. So, we've got one decent looking model on the bottom and then a really messed up model on the top. You can see in the background there's some of the, skybox or whatever in the far end. But yeah, you could save all this, probably clean it up, make it look good and turn it back into, a level for another game maybe or something. And anyway, let's see if we can get rid of all the extra junk we don't want. So I'm going to zoom back out here, give us one viewport to work with. it's a little bit easier. There we go. We're going to use our selection tool up at the top of the screen. It's kind of like a little mouse cursor icon. And we're just going to select as much as we can without hitting the cars, and hit our delete key. And you can see we got rid of a whole ton of stuff because we're only interested in the car for the sake of this stuff. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. I think we got pretty much all of it. Alrighty. Now we're going to zoom back in here. Put my little tool back up. And you can see the cars in relation to the origin, which is the center of this grid, or the modeling world inside of 3ds Max. Typically your car or your fighter jet or whatever you're using is centered at this origin point, which is where these little red lines and this black line here, X, Y, and Z axes in the world, are centered. You know, your car should have the center of it put there, or it might be in some cases the eye point of where your character is looking out of the car. It might be the front tip centered of the car. It might be higher or lower in the car. There's really no way of telling how that is set up unless we get some type of converter made in order to rip the models in a more natural fashion from the actual files. But for the purposes of stuff, let's just get rid of this, top side chunk of car right here. We're going to try and select as much as we can without hitting the good car. Now we got a little bit left right there. Nope. Right there. There we go. And like I said, as you can see, if I dip right along in line with the game world grid, this car here looks like it's trying to fall off a cliff or something because it's crooked. And it's pretty good and crooked too. Now you could use your tools and realign this, set it up right, but we really need to set this up so that it will move properly here for us in a second. What I'm going to do is select everything by drawing a box around it. As you can see, the car is made up of many, many, many parts. The fenders break off. They might, warp or distort like in game. The tires, little pieces of tires. The inside of the car is modeled. You can see there's a steering wheel, and there's a chair, and some other stuff in there, a center console. But all these pieces you might normally merge together into one single mesh for some games. I'm not going to show you how to do that here. I'm not the greatest modeler in the world. I'm sure there's probably somebody out on YouTube yelling at this video right now because I don't know how to move around a viewport properly. In this case, I'm just showing you how to get this stuff out of the game. You can do with it what you want from there. Maybe you got a modeler friend or somebody on a forum that can fix this up and put it out for somebody else to use. I'm going to take all of this and make it easier to grab by going up to group and then down to group, and see, it makes a group, and it makes the car one big thing you can select. It doesn't merge anything. I mean, that would be lovely if it could auto merge everything perfectly, but that's not often the case. It just makes it easier to select and move around. It also kind of messed up the texture, as you can see here. Chunks of it turn black. So, what have you. It's messed up. But you can take this, use your, kind of like a select and move. It's shaped like a cross up at the top of the screen, and there's one to the right of that that's select and rotate. And then you can get this and, drag the car back and forth until you get something, that looks, kind of right. It's not particularly hard to do any of that. You just have to remember what side is which and how you're pulling the car. So a little bit better. What I'm going to do is, close this file out. Typically you'd want to save it as a Max file or a 3DS file, whichever it is now in 2009 that they've switched to. But you'd want this centered over there, set up properly. What I'm going to do is close this out. Reset the world grid here. We're going to open our Ford GT file. As you can see, it's a little bit better set up. There's your tires, some other pieces. Now you might have noticed that we only have one headlight. Not only is there only one headlight, but it looks like we're missing, the whole headlight bucket from this side. There's also this little kind of dimple part where the Ford logo usually sits is missing. If you look at this little depression area here and these little two buttons, so to speak, and this little light, and there's a light over here. You go to this side of the car, it's a hole. It's just not there. See, it's missing. Your window's missing there, light from back there. What you can do is, like I said, take multiple captures of a map, or in this case, we were probably sitting, on this side of the car when I took the capture. The thing constantly rotates, around and up and down. If you took it from this side, and then you had a modeling person come back through here and either do symmetry on the car or cut it in half and then cut your new model capture in half and then merge these back together, that might be sufficient to fix the problem. I don't think you're going to get a perfect capture where just everything perfectly works. This is, the first or second best car I have seen come out of it, so that's what I'm using for the video to show you. The underside of the car is flat. All that stuff down there that you usually see when flipping the car over is a texture with a normal map that gives it depth. It's not actually modeled into the car. But you've got suspension and brakes and everything else in there. So otherwise, if you happen to know anybody that actually does coding or programming or heavy-duty modding and likes to make export tools or converters or model ripping programs, I'd love to hear from them. I would think if you've got this model here and all the coordinate data, you'd be able to possibly make something that would rip the model out of the files and blur directly. You can take this and use it in another game or a program or something, but we can't import this back into Blur currently. We might be able to do something with the textures depending on how things go, but right now this is the only way to get the files out of Blur. There are file utilities out there on the Xanix forum for game modding, Xantax, Xentax. If you shove that into Google, you'll probably find it. That allow you to get into the archive files and export all the different files that make up Blur in terms of resources like the music files, the textures, whatever. There's a lot of animator files and a lot of model files in there. But you can't do anything with them because they either have a changed header or they're just not saved in something that we know how to open at this point. So if there's somebody out there that wants to take a look at that, see what they can do, I'd love to hear from them at the shadowaxis.tk forum. I've got a little section in there called Jay's Mod Shop where I'm talking about different stuff I figured out how to do with Blur. It would be a great help. Otherwise, I think we've pretty much gone through, and look forward to seeing what you guys can come up with by using this program and how to set it up. Have a good one.